It was dark, and the sky above was filled with dust and broken stars. Ethan walked slowly through the ruins of an old alien outpost, his boots crunching over shattered metal and bones. He had been alone for days, looking for scraps, tools, or anything useful to sell back at the trade hub. The place was silent, almost too silent. He tightened the strap on his backpack and kept walking, his flashlight flickering over crumbling walls and twisted beams. Then he heard it. A small sound, not metal, not wind, a voice. Please. Please, human. Ethan froze. He turned toward the sound, pulling out his small shock blade. Again, the voice came, shaky and desperate. Please. Help. From behind a fallen wall, a small figure stepped out. It was a child, thin, covered in dirt, with large eyes that shimmered like glass in the dark. His skin had a soft blue hue, and his ears were long, bent backward like those of a forest creature. Ethan had seen aliens before, but never one this small. Don't come closer, Ethan warned, keeping the blade low but ready. The child didn't stop. He looked terrified, but hopeful. My mother. She's trapped, the boy said, his voice cracking. Please help. She can't breathe. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Where is she? The boy pointed with a trembling hand toward a pile of collapsed stone and metal in the distance. She fell when the roof broke. I tried, I screamed, but no one helped. They all ran, he said quickly. Panic in his voice. Ethan looked in the direction. He could see a small glow, maybe from a flare. Or a weak energy cell still working. The place looked unstable. You're not lying to me, are you? Ethan asked, still unsure. The boy shook his head. No, please. She'll die soon. Ethan sighed. He didn't trust people anymore, not after what happened on Zetranine, but this wasn't a trick. The boy's tears were real. The fear in his voice was real. And something inside Ethan moved, something he thought was long dead. All right, he said, sliding his blade back. Show me. The boy ran ahead, leading him down broken steps and through a narrow tunnel that smelled of rust and blood. They reached a large open chamber, its roof partially collapsed. Sparks flew from broken cables above. At the center, under slabs of fallen stone, lay a woman. She was tall, like most of her kind, her body covered in deep cuts and her leg twisted beneath the debris. Her breathing was shallow, lips barely moving. Mom? The boy cried, running to her side. The woman opened her eyes, just a little, and whispered, Tiru. So that was the boy's name, Tiru. Ethan stepped forward, scanning the rubble. The debris looked heavy, and one wrong move could bring the rest down. I can't lift this without tools, Ethan muttered. He opened his pack and pulled out a brace rod, then jammed it under a slab. Get back, kid, he said. Tiru obeyed without question. Ethan pushed with all his strength. The metal groaned, then shifted. One piece rolled off, then another. He got her torso free. But the leg was pinned hard. Suddenly, a sound echoed from above. Footsteps, more than one. Ethan looked up sharply. Someone's coming, he whispered. Tiru looked scared. The ones who left us. They don't want us alive. Ethan grabbed his blade again and moved in front of the mother and son. Voices rang out from the shadows above, rough, angry voices. There, that human's helping them. Grab the kid. The mother's worth more if she's alive, Ethan growled. Under his breath, this wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a fight. He raised his blade, his mind racing. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. The woman tried to sit up, but winced in pain. Ethan knew she wouldn't survive a chase or a battle. He had to protect them. Tiru, he said quickly, stay behind me no matter what. The boy nodded. Clutching his mother's hand, the voices grew louder. The scavengers were almost on them. Ethan took a deep breath. His heart was racing, but he was ready. He had faced worse before. This time, he wasn't fighting for money. He was fighting to keep an innocent child from losing his mother. And that made all the difference. The air inside the broken chamber grew colder as the footsteps above got louder. Ethan gripped his blade tighter, eyes fixed on the shadows near the broken walkway. Tiru pressed close to his mother, whispering her name again and again. "Mama? Mama, wake up." She opened her eyes for a moment and tried to speak. But only a soft groan came out. Ethan turned quickly to her pinned leg. She wasn't going anywhere unless he did something fast. He dropped to one knee and placed both hands under the heavy slab, pinning her down. With a sharp breath, he lifted. The stone shifted slightly, but not enough. He grunted, straining his arms, sweat dripping down his face. The voices were closer now. "I see light down there. Hurry, before they slip away." Ethan knew he had seconds. He reached into his pack and grabbed a micro-explosive stick, normally used to break rusted doors open. He looked at the woman's leg, then the slab. "This will hurt her," he whispered, "but it'll be better." Then, dying here, he placed the explosive carefully under the rock and turned to Tiru. "Cover your ears and hold your mother down." The boy nodded, his small hands trembling as he leaned over her. Ethan triggered the countdown to 3 seconds. Boom! The shockwave was short, but strong. The slab cracked and rolled off the woman's leg. She screamed for the first time, pain flooding her voice, but she was free. Ethan rushed to her side and checked her wound. Her leg was badly damaged, bone exposed, bleeding. She wouldn't be able to walk. Another sound, clanking metal. The scavengers were jumping down into the chamber. Ethan stood again. 3 of them, tall, armored in patchwork gear, carrying stun rifles and nets. One pointed. "There's the boy. And the human too. He's helping them." Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between the family and the attackers. "You'll have to go through me," he said coldly. The scavengers laughed. "He's just one man." One sneered, raising his weapon. Ethan didn't wait. He threw a flash pellet on the ground. Blinding light filled the space for 2 seconds. He rushed forward, slammed his blade's handle into the first scavenger's jaw. The man fell with a cry. The second fired his stun rifle, but missed. Ethan grabbed a broken pipe and threw it like a spear, hitting the scavenger's arm. The rifle dropped. The third ran at Ethan with a net, shouting, "You fool, you'll die for this." Ethan ducked the throw and tackled him, slamming him too. The ground, the chamber rumbled. Stone began to fall from the ceiling. "Run!" Ethan shouted, grabbing Tiru by the arm. He scooped up the mother and slung her over his back with a strength he didn't know he still had. Tiru ran beside him, eyes wide with fear and awe. They ducked through the nearest tunnel as the chamber collapsed behind them, burying the scavengers in dust and stone. Everything went silent again. Just Ethan's heavy breathing, the boy's soft crying, and the woman's groans filled the tunnel. They walked for a while. The tunnel twisted like a maze, barely lit by Ethan's last glow stick. Finally, they reached a small, open space with an old supply crate and a broken wall screen. Ethan laid the woman down gently, then opened the crate. Inside were some bandages, old tools, and half a water bottle. Not much, but better than nothing. He turned to Tiru. "What's your name again?" "Tiru," the boy said quietly. "And your mother?" "Sela." Ethan nodded. He cleaned her wound as best he could, wrapping it tight with the bandage. Sela was still unconscious, her face pale and her breathing slow. Tiru sat beside her, holding her hand. "Is she going to die?" he asked in a small voice. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at her leg, then into the boy's eyes. "I won't let that happen," he said finally. "Not while I'm still breathing." Tiru's eyes welled up with tears. "Thank you, human," he whispered. Everyone else ran away. They said she wasn't worth saving. Ethan looked away. He had heard those same words long ago when someone he cared for was left behind. He never forgot the feeling. He wouldn't let this boy feel it too. "We're not safe yet," Ethan said, standing up and checking his blade. "More scavengers will come, and they won't stop. But where can we go?" Ethan looked at the broken wall screen and tapped it. The display blinked to life for a few seconds. A map flickered, showing a path leading out of the tunnels and into the highlands. "My shelter's up there," Ethan said, pointing to the hills. "It's not much, but it's hidden. Can we take her there?" Tiru asked. "We'll have to," Ethan said, "but it'll be hard." He began building a small sled using metal from the crate and the tunnel rails. Sella groaned softly, eyes fluttering open for a second. She saw Ethan, then her son, and smiled. "Weakly, you stayed." Ethan gave her a small nod. "Rest," he said. "We're not done yet." The sled was ready. It was made from a flat metal door, tied with wires and a broken cable for pulling. Ethan placed Sella gently on it. Wrapping her with an old cloak from his pack, Tiru walked beside her, holding her hand, not letting go for even a second. The tunnel ahead was long, cracked, and dark, but it was their only path to freedom. Ethan pulled the sled with one hand and held his blade with the other. His mind stayed alert, eyes scanning every corner. Every shadow. Something didn't feel right. The air was too still, too quiet. Tiru whispered, "Are they gone?" Ethan didn't answer. He stopped and held up a hand, signaling silence. A soft noise echoed ahead. Footsteps, multiple pairs, slow and heavy. "They're blocking the way out," Ethan said quietly. Tiru looked up at him, his eyes filled with fear again. "What do we do?" Ethan turned to the broken wall beside them. "There's another path," he said, pointing at a narrow crack in the tunnel wall, "but it's tighter and darker." Tiru swallowed hard. "We'll go," he said, his voice brave. "I'll help." They turned and slipped through the crack, dragging the sled behind them. The space was barely wide enough for Ethan's shoulders. Sparks flew from hanging wires, and the air smelled like old smoke and mold. Sella moaned in pain, but Ethan kept going. Behind them, distant voices echoed again. "There they are, in the wall tunnel. Don't let them escape." Ethan cursed under his breath and moved faster. He found a broken service hatch and kicked it open. They dropped into an old maintenance tunnel below. It was steep, dirty, and filled with water. But it gave them some distance. Still, the voices were following. Ethan stopped at a corner and set Sella down for a moment. "We need to slow them down," he said. He turned to Tiru. "Take this." He handed him a light flare and a small metal disc. "Go up that ramp and wait near the old fan gate. Light this if anyone comes close." Tiru nodded and ran. Ethan stayed behind. He reached into his pack and pulled out 3 more flash pellets and a small firebomb. He hid them along the tunnel path, setting traps like he had done long ago during border wars. Minutes passed. Then footsteps. Closer now. The first scavenger stepped around the corner. Ethan threw a flash pellet directly at his face. Boom! Light exploded in the narrow tunnel. The man screamed, blinded, stumbling back into the others. Ethan rolled forward and tackled him hard into the wall. Another came swinging a metal rod. Ethan ducked and stabbed forward with the edge of his blade. Not to kill, just to stop him. The third attacker raised a shock rifle. Ethan dropped, kicked his leg out, and slammed the rifle out of the man's hands. "Why are you helping them, human?" The scavenger shouted. Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy surviving. He grabbed the firebomb, pulled the pin, and tossed it behind him. Flames burst through the tunnel, cutting off the scavenger's advance. The air grew hot and thick with smoke. Ethan staggered back toward the ramp where Tiru waited. The boy lit the flare. Red light filled the dark corner. "This way," Tiru shouted. Waving, Ethan picked up the sled and ran toward the glow. They reached the fan gate, and Ethan used his blade to cut the lock. The gates swung open with a loud creak, and fresh air hit their faces. Behind them, voices screamed in anger. But they didn't follow through the fire. Not yet. Ethan slammed the gate shut and jammed a metal pipe through the handles. They were safe for now. He dropped to his knees. Breathing hard, Tiru looked at him with wide eyes. "You fought all of them." The boy said softly, "Alone." Ethan didn't speak. He looked at his shaking hands. Blood on his sleeves, smoke on his skin. He had done what he had to do. Sela stirred again, her voice weak. "Tiru, are you safe?" The boy rushed to her side, tears in his eyes. "Yes, Mama. He saved us." Sela looked at Ethan, and even in her pain, she smiled. "Thank you, human. I don't know why you stayed, but—" "Thank you." Ethan looked away. "I don't either," he muttered, but he did know. He couldn't leave them the way others had once left him. He wouldn't be that kind of man again. The wind blew gently through the vent tunnel. The stars above flickered faintly through broken grates. They were close to the surface now, close to safety. But Ethan knew this wasn't over yet. The scavengers would come again, and next time. They'd bring more than just clubs and nets. The night sky above was cloudy, with stars hiding behind layers of dust and smoke. Ethan pulled the sled slowly across the dry hillside, his muscles aching with each step. Behind him, Tiru walked silently, holding a glow stick to light the way. Sela lay weak and quiet on the sled, her breath shallow, her injured leg wrapped tightly with torn cloth. They had escaped the tunnels. But not the danger. Ethan kept checking over his shoulder. "They'll come," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Scavengers always come back." Tiru heard him, but said nothing. He just walked, his small legs, tired but steady. "How far is your place?" the boy asked after a while. "Not far," Ethan replied, "just over the ridge." "Maybe an hour more," Tiru nodded. Even though his body was tired and his feet hurt, he wouldn't stop. Not until his mother was safe. They moved in silence for a while, the wind blowing gently over the hills. The land was dead. No trees, no animals. Only broken stone and rusted machines buried in the dirt. The war had ended years ago, but the planet still carried its scars. As they climbed higher, Sela stirred again. "Water," she whispered. Ethan reached into his pack and pulled out the last half of his water bottle. He lifted her head gently and helped her drink. Tiru watched closely, his hands gripping the side of the sled. "She was strong once," the boy said softly. "She used to fight slavers. She saved people like you do." Ethan looked at the woman. She didn't look like a warrior now. She looked like someone barely holding on. "I believe you," Ethan said. "I've seen warriors fall, too." They kept moving. Step by step, the stars began to peek through the clouds, offering just enough light to see the ridge ahead. But just as they reached it, Ethan froze. He crouched low, pulling the sled to a stop. Tiru dropped beside him, confused. "What is it?" Ethan pointed silently across the ridge, below them, in the valley. Several campfires glowed in the distance. Figures moved around them. "Armed. Loud scavenger camp. They're blocking the path," Ethan whispered. They came faster. Then I thought, "Is there another way?" Tiru asked quickly. Ethan thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There's an old mining trail to the east. It's harder, longer, but it's hidden." Tiru looked at his mother, then back at Ethan. "Then we take it." They turned east, keeping low, staying in the shadows. The path was rough, loose rocks, sharp drops, and steep climbs. Ethan tied the sled to his waist and pulled with everything he had. Sela groaned now and then, but didn't speak. Tiru walked beside her, whispering gently to keep her calm. After a long climb, they reached a narrow ledge with a small cave carved into the mountain. "We'll rest here for a bit," Ethan said, nearly falling from exhaustion. They slipped inside the cave. It was cold, but dry. Ethan set a small heat stone to keep them warm and used a tiny light crystal to brighten the space. Tiru sat beside his mother, brushing her hair gently. Ethan sat by the entrance, blade ready. Listening for any sound from below, Tiru broke the silence after a while. "Why are you helping us?" Ethan looked at the boy, then down at his hands. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because no one helped me when I needed it." Tiru nodded, understanding more than his young age should allow. "She said, good people are rare," he whispered, "but sometimes they appear when you need them the most." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Your mother is wise. She said, my father died in a battle, and that I should always protect people, even if they're strangers." Ethan stared at the boy for a moment. "You've done well so far," he said. "You stayed with her, even when things got bad." Tiru looked up, his eyes shining. "She's all I have." Ethan looked out of the cave. The stars now brighter. "I had someone once," he said quietly. "A daughter. Younger than you." Tiru didn't speak, sensing the sadness in Ethan's voice. "I couldn't save her," Ethan continued, "but maybe helping you and your mom. Maybe it makes something right again." Tiru didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and sat closer to Ethan. In that quiet cave, surrounded by cold and danger, something unspoken passed between them. Not words, not two promises, but a kind of bond, the kind formed in fire and fear, strong, silent, and real. Suddenly, a soft beep echoed from Ethan's wrist device. Emotion alert, he looked at the screen. 2 red dots moving toward the cave, fast. He stood up quickly, grabbing his blade. "They found us," he said. Tiru stood too, wide-eyed. "Get behind me. Protect your mom," Ethan ordered. Outside the cave, footsteps crunched over the stones, voices laughed. "They're in here. I told you I saw light." Ethan braced himself. He wasn't leaving this fight, not this time. Outside the cave, the wind picked up. It blew through the rocks like a ghostly whistle, carrying dust and cold mist across the hillside. Ethan stood at the cave entrance, blade in hand, watching the 2 red dots on his wrist screen move closer. Tiru crouched beside his mother, arms wrapped around her, whispering, "Stay with me, Mama, please." Inside the cave, the warmth of the heat stone did little to calm the storm building outside. Then a voice came, rough and mocking. "We found you. Human, you think you can run forever." Ethan stepped into view, the glow from the cave lighting half his face. "I only need to stand long enough," he replied calmly. The first scavenger came into sight, tall, masked, carrying a hooked blade. The second followed, holding a net launcher and a shock baton. Ethan didn't move. He waited. The scavenger with the net aimed first. "You should have sold the woman to us. Could have made good credits," he growled. "I don't sell people." Ethan answered, "Try someone else." The scavenger fired the net. Ethan dodged to the side, grabbing the net midair and yanking it hard. The weapon flew from the attacker's hands, and Ethan rushed in with his blade. He struck fast, disabling the net launcher before swinging around and slashing the baton from the second man's grip. But the first scavenger was faster than expected. He kicked Ethan backward, slamming him into the cave wall. Ethan's back hit stone hard, and he dropped to one knee, groaning. Inside the cave, Tiru cried out. No, then. Something changed. The air grew colder. The mist rolled in faster, thick, swirling like a wave of white smoke. Even the scavengers paused, looking around nervously. "What is this?" one of them muttered. The answer came with a sound low, heavy and wet, a growl, but not like any beast from Earth or the outer colonies. It came from the mist itself. Ethan's eyes widened. "No," he whispered. "Not here. Not now." Tiru looked up, confused and afraid. "What is it?" He asked Sella, who had been barely awake, forced her eyes open. Her lips moved slowly. Mist. Beast. The scavengers looked around wildly now. Back off. One shouted, raising his blade toward the fog. It's just smoke. Then a massive shape moved in the mist. It didn't walk. It flowed. 8 legs. Covered in gray armor plates and eyes like dim lanterns glowing in the fog. Its mouth opened sideways. It's full of rows of jagged wet teeth. The beast roared not. Loud but deep, like thunder buried underground. It lunged toward the nearest scavenger and pulled him screaming into the mist. The second tried to run, but the creature's tail lashed out. Knocking him off the cliff's edge, silence returned. Only the fog remained. Ethan breathed hard, trying to control the panic in his chest. The mist beast was still close, watching, waiting. He knew the rule. If you moved too fast, if you made noise, it would strike. He backed slowly into the cave. "Don't speak," he whispered to Tiru. "Don't move unless I do." Tiru held his breath, trembling, but Sela. She moved, not in fear, but in strength, using all her remaining energy. She pulled herself to her knees. Then, with one hand glowing faintly, she drew a strange symbol on the floor. Ethan looked at her, confused. "What are you doing?" Sela didn't speak. She placed her glowing hand on the ground and whispered something in her language, ancient, soft, like a prayer. The symbol glowed briefly. Outside, the beast paused. It tilted its head. Then it backed away, slowly, step by step, until it vanished into the mist. The wind grew quiet again. The fog began to fade. Ethan stared in disbelief. What? What did you just do?" Sela collapsed, weak again, her hands still faintly glowing. "I used to guide beasts like that. Before I was hunted," she said faintly. "They don't forget their own." Tiru rushed to her side. "You saved us," he said, hugging her gently. Ethan knelt beside them. "You're full of surprises," he said, with a small smile. Sela gave a faint smile back. "So are you." Human. Ethan checked outside. The path was clear now. But danger was never far. They couldn't rest yet. He stood up, grabbed the sled rope, and looked back at them. "Let's move." Before something worse shows up, Tiru nodded, holding his mother's hand tightly. They stepped back into the cold night, walking into the unknown. But this time, not as strangers. Now, as something more. The sun was rising slowly over the hills, painting the sky in pale pink and soft gold. Ethan dragged the sled up the final slope of the trail, sweat on his brow and his arms burning. Behind him, Tiru walked with tired steps, still holding his mother's hand as she lay quietly. Wrapped in old blankets, they had made it. Ethan's shelter stood hidden between 2 rock pillars, covered in scrap metal and camo sheets that blended into the stone. He stopped at the entrance, looking back one last time before unlocking the old metal door. "Welcome to home," he said, pushing the door open. Inside, the shelter was simple. 1 small heater, 2 beds made from crates and foam, and a table. Built from engine parts, it wasn't much, but it was safe. Tiru helped Ethan lift Sela onto the nearest bed. She groaned in pain, but her eyes slowly opened. The warmth of the room seemed to bring her back to life. Ethan checked her bandages, added a few drops of healing gel. Then stood up. "I have food," he said, walking to the back corner and opening a storage crate. He handed Tiru a packet of dried fruit and a small water bottle. The boy didn't even wait. He tore the packet open and gave his mother the first piece before taking one for himself. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching them. For the first time, he saw peace on their faces. But it wouldn't last long. He knew it. "Now?" he said gently. "I need the truth." Sela looked at him weakly. "Who are you really?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at her son. Then closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her voice was steady, soft, but strong. I was part of the resistance, she said. Before the Empire collapsed, Ethan blinked. The resistance. You mean the group that fought the slave lords on Viaran? She nodded slowly. I led a small unit. Freed over 200 captives, she continued. But after the peace talks, they hunted us. Said we were too dangerous to keep alive, Ethan. Sat down, stunned. He had heard stories about the resistance. Brave, ruthless, and always hunted. But why are the scavengers after you now? He asked. Sela hesitated. Then she looked at Tiru. He lowered his head. Already knowing what she was about to say. Tiru isn't just a child, she said. He carries something inside him. Something rare. Ethan leaned forward. What? Do you mean? His blood? Sela whispered. It reacts to ancient tech machines from before the collapse. Doors open, systems power up. He's the key to forgotten places. Ethan's eyes widened. That's why they were after him, he said slowly. Not just to sell him, but to use him. Yes, Sela said, her voice filled with guilt. They wanted to take him too. The core vaults, open them. Control whatever power is locked inside. Ethan stood up and began pacing. Now it makes sense, he muttered. Why they chased you. Why they never gave up. He looked at Tiru, who was silent, staring at his feet. You okay, kid? Tiru nodded, but his hands were shaking. I didn't want this, the boy said quietly. I just wanted my mom to be safe. That's all. Ethan knelt beside him. You didn't ask for it, he said, but it's not your fault. Sela reached out and took her son's hand. I tried to protect him, to hide from everyone. But I couldn't do it alone. Ethan looked at her, his voice softening. You're not alone anymore. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the shelter's alert light blinked red. Motion detected. Ethan jumped to his feet and ran to the screen. A drone camera outside showed 3 scavenger bikes coming up the far trail. They found us, he growled. Tiru's face went pale. Sela tried to rise, but her body was still weak. Ethan grabbed his rifle and strapped his blade to his back. You two stay here, he said firmly. Lock the door after me. Don't open it unless I say your name. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The wind had picked up again, blowing sand across the hillside. Ethan stood tall at the edge of the ridge, his rifle aimed. The scavengers stopped their bikes and stepped forward. One of them raised a hand. Not in peace, but as a warning. Give us the boy, human, the leader shouted. And we'll let you live. Ethan shook his head slowly. You don't know me very well, he said. He lowered his rifle and fired the first shot. The first shot cracked through the air, hit the ground near the scavenger leader's foot, sending dirt flying. The message was clear. Ethan wasn't going to surrender. The 3 scavengers looked at each other, then spread out slowly. Their weapons were newer, sharper, deadly, but Ethan didn't back down. He took cover behind a rock. Steadying his breath, aiming carefully, behind the shelter door, Tiru held his mother's hand tightly. Will he be okay? The boy whispered. Sela, still pale, placed her hand on his cheek. He's not fighting just for us now, Tiru. He's fighting for what's right outside. Ethan fired again, striking one scavenger's shoulder. The man screamed and fell back behind his bike. The others charged forward, firing stun rounds that cracked the rocks around Ethan's head. Ethan moved quickly, rolling to the side and tossing a flash pellet uphill. Light exploded again. A trick that never got old. He rushed forward, tackling the nearest scavenger to the ground, grabbing the man's shock stick and jamming it in two. His armor, sparks flew. Another down, but the leader was waiting. He swung a plasma whip across Ethan's chest, burning through his jacket and cutting deep into his skin. Ethan fell back with a cry, his body shaking from the pain. The leader stepped over him. Whip ready again? You should have taken the deal. The man snarled. Now I'll burn the whole shelter to the ground. But just as he raised his arm again, the shelter door opened. Tiru stood there, his hands trembling, his small frame outlined by the light from inside. "Leave him alone," he shouted, stepping forward. The leader laughed cruelly. "Oh, perfect. Save me the trouble." He raised the whip again. Then, a blast. Ethan had used his last shock round. It hit the scavenger's chest, dead on. The man stumbled back, gasping, electricity dancing across his armor. Ethan stood slowly, bleeding, barely breathing. But still standing. "Stay away from the boy," he said coldly. The scavenger tried to swing again, but Ethan slammed his blade into the man's side. Ending it, silence returned to the hillside. Dust swirled around the three broken bodies. Ethan dropped to his knees, coughing, pain shooting through his ribs. Tiru ran to him. "Don't die. Please don't die." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan whispered, smiling weakly. "I'll not until you both get out of here alive." Tiru helped him back into the shelter. Sela tried to rise when she saw the blood on Ethan's chest, but she was too weak. Tears filled her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." Ethan collapsed into the chair beside the wall. "I know," he said softly, "but I wanted to." He looked at them, the broken warrior mother and the boy who had seen too much. "You too. Remind me of what I lost," he added. "But you also remind me that I can still protect something worth living for." Tiru wiped his tears and sat close to Ethan. "Then stay with us," he said quietly. "Please." Ethan looked at the boy for a long moment, and then nodded. Sela smiled, though her eyes still held pain. "You saved my son," she said. "You gave him hope again." "And me too." The next few days passed slowly. Ethan patched up the shelter, buried the scavengers far from view, and watched the hills carefully. No one came after that. The wind carried silence, not of fear, but of peace. Sela grew stronger. With each day, Tiru laughed again, real laughter, as he helped Ethan fix an old radio and taught him some of their language. One evening, as the sun fell low over the rocks, Sela stepped outside with the help of a cane. She looked at the sky, then at Ethan. "There's a place far from here," she said. "A hidden world where those like me still live. If we make it there, Tiru will be safe forever." Ethan didn't speak. He looked at her, then at Tiru playing near the fire. "Then we go," he said. "Together?" Sela nodded, tears in her eyes. The wind blew gently across the stones. Not cold this time, not lonely, just calm. A new journey waited. But for now, in this small, quiet moment, a human and alien woman and her child were safe, and they were no longer strangers. They were a family.